Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Each episode features conversations about emerging trends and news that affect the death care industry. We talk to people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, we have part 2 of our Year in Review podcast. A couple quick notes before we get started. I don't know if you noticed last week, but I had a cold when we recorded this, and it wasn't so bad when I was the one asking the questions. But in this episode, Tom Nondorf, who is the editor of American Cemetery and Cremation, is asking the questions, and I am answering them. And I've got to be honest, as I was editing it, the stuffiness in my nose was driving me nuts, and I love the sound of my own voice. So I know that you guys, it would have been unlistenable for you guys. So I am re-recording it. The answers are the same. They're not verbatim, but you're going to have to trust me on that. I probably could have gotten away without telling you, but I felt a little dishonest about it. It was just my audio was garbage and I'm recording it over. So there's that. Before we get started, I want to play an audio response from Jennifer Floyd. She is the managing director of the funeral home that's run by San Antonio College, and she's been featured on this show before, and she's been featured in Funeral Service Insider before. She was one of the 2 people who responded to my question via voicemail rather than writing, and so we're featuring those in the podcast. They'll also be independently available on Kates-Boylston.com in the Funeral Service Insider section. But for now, let me give you Jennifer's response, and then we're going to play an ad by this week's sponsor, which is Passages, and then I'll see you on the other side with my conversation with Tom Nondorf. All right, let's get into it.
Hi, Tony. Jennifer Floyd from San Antonio College Mortuary. I'm going to answer your question. What hope, fear, or prediction do you have for 2025? So my prediction is that the funeral industry will continue to embrace innovation and technology. I think that perhaps with the advancements in memorialization methods such as the VR experiences and the digital keepsakes, that we will need to find a balance in our ability to preserve the human touch, as it offers a deep emotional connections that are at the heart of the grieving process. I fear that with the growing reliance on technology, especially all the virtual memorials and services, that we may find ourselves offering more impersonable services. And so while the digital tools offer convenience and accessibility, my concern is that they may overshadow the deeply personable aspects of funeral services that help families through the grief process. Happy New Year, Tony, and I hope that 2025 brings you about everything that you desire. Thanks, Jennifer.
Well, Jennifer, one of my primary hopes for 2025 was to start getting audio feedback. So thank you for that. Mission accomplished. And I'm recording this in the first week of January. So that's exciting. If you would like to send some audio feedback, you can leave a message on my office phone. It is 732-746-0233, extension 709. And if you have something to say about the show, if you have something to say about the industry, if you have something to say that you think other funeral directors or cemeterians or death care professionals in general need to know, send it to me. As long as it is appropriate, I'd be happy to play it up in front of the show. And now here is a word from our sponsor, Passages International. Looking for a way to honor your loved one while honoring the planet? At Passages, we specialize in eco-friendly funeral products made from renewable, biodegradable materials. Whether it's a stunning willow casket, a biodegradable urn for scattering, or our unique memorial keepsakes, we help create meaningful goodbyes that tread lightly on the earth. Join the movement toward greener funerals. Visit passagesinternational.com and discover how you can celebrate a life while protecting the planet for generations to come. Link in the show notes.
It's time to put Tony Russo on the hot seat. We both work for the Kates-Boylston empire, and we all read each other's stuff here. So it's a lot in terms of what goes into 1 year, the things that fascinate us both. So I want to ask you a few things because like I said, I read your stuff all the time. Spoiler alert or asterisk, I have to read his stuff all the time, but I enjoy it Cremation's rising. Have you heard that, Tony?
I have, yes.
From time to time. My question for you is, where is it going to happen? Nobody wants to have a crematory around them.
Well,
a big theme of your writing this year is your sort of anti-NIMBY approach. Not in my backyard for folks. We hear a ton of stories about people fighting cremation facilities. We've heard the recent one upstate New York that I guess people have been fighting for a long time.
Yeah,
something's got to give there. Where if cremation is going to continue to this degree, we even had a story where someone was going to have a crematory out by an airport. You think, well, what's better than that? Like, who cares? You're already getting airplane exhaust and the sound of airplane. Who's going to complain about that? Well, people were giving that person a hard time. Where's it going to happen, Tony?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. It's been difficult for me for a very personal reason. And that very personal reason is I made my bones covering zoning and land development and things like that. It's something that I still follow. I'm me and 6 civil engineers are interested in in zoning law, right? And in what happens with zoning. And when I was a beat reporter, one of my great frustrations was people would show up at meetings and say, why are you doing this? Why hasn't anybody told me? And it was always something that I'd been covering for 6 months, for a year, for 3 years. And I'd been writing editorials and I'd been saying, this is going to happen. And no one read the newspaper. And I know the kind of people who tend to make these big anti-development pushes in general are the kind of people who don't pay attention to their lives. And honestly, I'm glad that they're unhappy. I'm glad that they feel like their neighborhood is in jeopardy, because you can't only be a neighbor when you feel like it. You can't only pay attention to what's going on in your town when you're, angry. And, on the other side, the town, we do tentatively, I guess, elect people who are supposed to be looking out for our best interests. But if someone comes in and they want to do something that's within the law, I don't see how anyone could expect them to just say, well, I know that people don't like it. So that's part number one. I am harder on the NIMBYs than I used to be, because I've been at it for too long, and they don't get any smarter and they don't get any nicer and they don't make any effort to become more informed. They're just great big babies throwing great big tantrums, and I don't want anything good to happen for them. So I'm glad, first of all, that they're uncomfortable, as I mentioned. But the second thing is, I think there's a huge disconnect between the people who are running things and the people who are doing the running. And so a lot of times people are like, well, we don't need a crematory because we're going to have green burial and because we have regular burial. And, the Amagani issue, which has been going on seemingly forever and ever, in the reporting on that, which we did, they said that, there isn't a real big problem. There's not a lack of crematories in the area. And that's what, I think that's by old standards. It certainly isn't by, post-COVID standards, because it was demonstrated, like literally New York had to ship their dead elsewhere to be cremated because they couldn't accommodate the number. And unfortunately, that's just the way that it's going to shake out. It's going to be something that we kind of limp along as we kind of change what's going on in funeral service, because there is green burial on the horizon.
So
no natural organic reduction, and I'm very excited about the potential for aquamation, should it be passed in various places. I mean, consider New York in general. I mean, cremation has been banned in this city for years and years, but if they embraced, the aquamation, if aquamation was legal in New York City, that would be a good place for it. There's room, certainly.
All right, Tony Matthews, it's under fire from within. What's up with that? What do you think is going to happen there? Is it
Yeah, this has been a crazy story that we've been following all year and are going to be following. I mean, and continue to follow. There was breaking news in the new year on this.
Yes, indeed.
One of the things I like to do is cover the conference calls, the earnings calls that all of these, larger funeral companies, publicly traded funeral companies have. And back in May, there was this guy, Nick Ripostella, who got on and, he was just getting on to complain. Like he couldn't get through to the customer service line. And he got on the conference call. And usually the conference call is just for journalists and financial journalists. I don't ever ask questions on the conference call, and primarily for analysts. So Goldman Sachs types who are trying to figure out how to price the company, asking questions that, I guess will give them a better idea how. So he got on and he's like, you guys have to get out of the packaging business and the branding business. And they're like, yeah, well, we'll see. And the next thing you know, another big company came out and said, hey, yeah, no, you definitely have to get out of the packaging business. As a matter of fact, we're going to challenge your board. So so this company is named Barrington, and their hope and their plan is to fire the CEO and replace several of the board members with people who are more friendly to their attitude. And we'll see what happens. But one way or the other, I don't think it makes a lot of difference for funeral service. It is an indication about how valuable memorialization is, and cremation. We were just talking about what's going to happen with cremation. Well, Pat Matthews and the people who are fighting to make them more aggressive in the memorialization sector, they think cremation is the thing, the business to be in, and they're not wrong. There are these little blips that we just discussed, but cremation is the next 10, 15 years the thing, and there's no reason to not be aggressive about pursuing that, especially if you are a multinational company. So we'll see how it shakes out. They have a vote on February 20th where we'll see who either gets control or retains control of the company. And then by, I don't know, April or so, we should have an idea what's going to happen next at Matthews International.
Definitely reminiscent of the TV show Succession, if you watch that, in terms of the intrigue. Do you think anything else is behind the other than what they are face value complaining about?
There is something going on with they're being sued by Tesla for $1 billion. And I know that people are concerned about that. And there's been some question about whether their energy storage business is compatible with non-Tesla cars, or, there's a lot of this, as you said, Succession, going back and forth in the press. And these are people's opinions about how a company should be run. So I don't think it's right to say that people aren't being honest, but people are making an argument and they're trying to be persuasive. So it's weird to try to kind of parse out what's real and what's potentially real, as this goes on. But we'll see. And it'll be, if nothing else, it makes for really, really compelling financial journalism, which is not something, you usually get to hear about.
Now, one of the biggest stories of the year that I thought was fascinating, as slightly surprising, maybe the biggest, you tell me what you think, but that was Park Lawn going private.
Yeah.
And you kind of had an interesting front seat row for a little bit, because you happened to be hanging out with Chris Kruger right when that news was starting to break at one of our events in Rhode Island. You ended up writing a great interview sequence with the players that we ended up running in American Cemetery and Cremation magazine. Mm. Tell me how big a deal that was looking back, and since then, do you think it's still a big deal between Park Lawn and the Homesteaders, or is it too soon to tell?
Yeah, I think a bit of both. I don't think there's any question that was the biggest story of 2024. And I don't think there's any question that it'll be another several years before we really see the implications of it. So Park Lawn was a publicly traded company in Canada. Is still a publicly traded company. No, it's definitely not a publicly traded company. It's weird whether they're based in Canada or not, for lots of complex reasons that had to do with its ability to be acquired by an American insurance company. And I'm still doing reporting on it, and it's a really wonky story. There'll be more on it in the new year, but I guess the upshot of it is, one of the largest insurance companies bought one of the largest pre-need companies bought one of the largest funeral home groups, and it makes some people excited and it makes other people nervous. And the people that are excited are probably excited for good reasons, and the people who are nervous are probably nervous for the same correct reasons, because it can be intimidating. Yeah, and what was really weird at the time, I didn't really stumble onto this confusing aspect of it, but I also wasn't looking for, any like big story in it. But the reason that I reached out to homesteaders about the acquisition was, all of a sudden I started getting all of these emails like, so-and-so is switching to such and such is the new insurance company for so-and-so. And there were a lot of them. And, I'm still relatively new to the business. And I thought, well, maybe August is the time of year when all the insurance contracts end and people make these announcements. And I got an announcement about a new big partnership. We got them from SCI. We got them from NGL. We didn't get any from homesteaders about the decision by Park Lawn to make them the, exclusive insurer. And I mean, it makes sense and it's not a surprise, but also, in the early reporting, they're like, Park Lawn's going to run Park Lawn and Homesteaders is going to run Homesteaders. And, it doesn't matter which, company you use, it'll be separate and independent. And that didn't last very long at all, which is, it's what makes people nervous and can make people nervous. So I'll be doing more reporting on that in the new year. But for now, what is really interesting is Park Lawn is going on this huge acquisition spree, and they're not alone. Like this, as I said in an editorial late last year or early in 2025, that this is going to be a serious year for acquisitions. We're going to see a lot of funeral homes close, just shutter. And we're going to see a lot of acquisitions. SCI was open about it. They're like, we have a budget for acquisitions, but every time if we beat revenue, then we're going to use that budget as a percentage, not as a number. So SCI is looking to buy everything that they can. I spoke with Anthem, who is looking to buy as much as they can. Carriage is looking to buy as much as they can tactically. So this is going to be a big year for acquisitions. And Park Lawn went from being, kind of not quite cash poor, but not in a great position to go on a huge spending spree. And now they have, the backing of homesteaders, clearly the backing of homesteaders. And that's going to change things, because not only does homesteaders have money, but homesteaders has this really interesting loan program that they have for small funeral homes. And, I wonder how that shakes out as far as Park Lawn's acquisitions. Like I said, I think in 5 years, we might have a sense of what this is going to look like in the long term. And I don't think that they're figuring it out. I think that both homesteaders and Park Lawn have a pretty solid plan in place, but how to implement it without rocking the boat too much, and, making sure that homesteaders continues to be fair to all of its customers and things like that. I mean, they're a careful company, and, I guess we'll just have to see. Yeah, and that's part of it. Like I was very fortunate to kind of stumble upon that story as well, because Park Lawn was trying to buy Carriage, but the the deal came apart for lots of different reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with rules about ownership of cemeteries in different states and things like that. But Carriage, which was just on the ropes once the acquisition didn't go through, once Park Lawn said that they would not be buying Carriage. I mean, I spoke with Carlos Quezada, and he's like, we are all about cutting debt. We're going to cut our debt. We're going to divest ourselves of maybe things that didn't make sense. And that's something that's really rare to hear from a CEO saying, we bought this, and you know what? It wasn't a great idea. So rather than just continue to sink money into and not even sink money, but maybe to continue to not profit from maybe a mediocre purchase, let's sell that to someone who's going to make more money from it, and let's focus ourselves. So they did that all during 2024, and they were profitable all year, which is the first time they've been profitable all year in forever. And they're making money, they're making good choices, and they're buying funeral home groups. And that was kind of the thing that Carriage was mentioning in its earnings calls, that they will still buy, individual funeral homes as they become available, but they're also really more interested in buying chunks of funeral homes, because if there's if a funeral home group, 6, 8 funeral homes, 5, they have already built in a bunch of synergies so that they're already probably running pretty efficiently. And so if you have a consolidator like Carriage or any of them come in, they can bring even more, efficiencies to bear on an already efficient system, as opposed to trying to integrate a single independent in, which can be more difficult. And if there's not enough, if you're buying a funeral home that's not near any of the other funeral homes you already own, then it doesn't make the same kind of sense. So I think it'll be a great year for that, and we'll see how that shakes out. Hi, I want to just take a quick second to talk to you about the Kates-Boylston events for 2025, because we already have a ton of them booked and we're really excited about them. And I want you to just know the dates, save the date if you will. We have several in person, we have several virtual, and of course we have the occasional webinar. We have a webinar coming up like now on, I think, January 30th. We have Cadence, which is going to be a great webinar. They will be speaking about aftercare. But if you go to Kates-Boylston.com and click on the events tab, you'll find all of the things we have coming up. One that I'm particularly excited about is on March 11th and 12th, we will be in Pittsburgh with our funeral service business plan. Now, the last time we did this, it was in Rhode Island, and that was a really, really great event. And people are still talking about it. And I think that event went so well that we had even better attendance in Houston, which was our most recent one. But anyway, if you go to Kates-Boylston.com, click on the events tab, you'll see all of the different things we have coming up for 2025. Another one that's interesting in March is called Cemetery Software. And I know that we have a lot of cemeterians who listen to this show. We're going to be doing several cemetery-themed events in 2025. So anyway, check that link in the show notes. And now let's get back to, well, I guess me still talking.
Now, the difference between you and me, or one difference between you and me, there are many, but one difference between you and me in our working environment is you need to be more on sort of the breaking, at least within the span of a week, whereas my print magazine and American Funeral Director come out once a month. You've been making some changes of your own in FSI this year, and what ones are you sort of most excited about, and in terms of kind of improving the reader experience?
Well, there are scads of things that I'm doing that I've been doing for a while, but I'm kind of like, I guess, making them or having them or getting to see them coalesce, but a lot more focus on the digital and a lot more focus on regular contact with our readers. So traditionally, FSI comes out on Thursdays, and nothing about that is going to change. We're going to send the FSI that people have come to expect every Thursday without fail. But in addition, we do the podcasts, and I have been trying to do more email newsletters during the week. So, for example, on Mondays now, I send out a commentary on the previous week's news. Now, that commentary will still appear in the, quote, print edition that we send out on Thursdays, but if you want it earlier, you will get it earlier. And the same thing with some of the in case you missed it stories and some of the obituaries. As I write these stories, I'm making them live on Funeral Service Insider on Kates-Boylston.com. So if you wait till Thursday, you will get everything that everyone else gets. But if you want it sooner, we're making that available. We also have added a weekly podcast that is not just for subscribers, but an enticement to subscribe, because a lot of times I don't tell the whole story on the free version. Anything that I do real reporting on, I make exclusive to our paid subscribers. But on Friday, I do a news roundup and we put that out as a podcast. And on Wednesday, we've been having bonus podcasts, which are just, conversations that I think people might like to hear, or like even little promotional things we might like to do for them.
Now, our colleague, Patty Martin Barchi, puts out American Funeral Director 12 times a year and has been in this industry well before you and I. Impressive individual in terms of her knowledge base. I do want to talk about the stuff that she has done that was most exciting for you over the year. One thing I know you mentioned in your column that I loved as well, that she picked up, and I think you did a podcast with this individual as well. Hopefully you could think of her name, but she's an illustrator who does coloring books, but she also now writes a column that appears regularly in American Funeral Director that talks about a different children's book dealing with grief.
Yeah. This is Amanda Marie Elise King. She is a funeral director. She's an embalmer. She's an artist. I talked to her. She does like wood cutting, hand printing from wood cutting. Just, very, very interesting person with not just varied interest, but the ability and wherewithal to kind of follow them and make them interesting. And yet, so she's been doing a monthly column for American Funeral Director where she talks about children's books about death, and I've purchased some of them. I mean, it's a great column, and I encourage you, if you're a subscriber and you'd like to read them online, they're shareable online, and they're definitely worth doing. And she's always a really interesting interview. Most recently, for example, she put out a coloring book, a grown-up coloring book of, parts of the body and dying process. And it's fascinating. Links to all of those things are in the show notes. But that was one of the really big deals this year for me, was getting to see this, quality column every month that, takes a different look at death care.
It's cool. And the way she sets it up too, it reminds me of, very much of, it puts you in the position of being a kid in a way. Do you remember you'd have those reading assignments as a kid?
Right.
And then at the end there would be a series of questions, like what did the protagonist mean when he said this, And I think it's a great way to kind of frame it in a way that helps people see how these books are helpful for young people having experienced loss in their lives.
Absolutely. The whole idea of this is not only what books you should buy, but these are some guides that you can either give families or use yourselves to talk about this book. It's a really invaluable resource, and we're really glad to have her. But of course, in American Funeral Director, the other not feature, I think, but certainly this year, the Funerals of the Famous book, which is coming out in early 2025, is getting to read those stories this year. Patty always does such a great job on them. I mean, sometimes contributors do them, and the contributors are great, but Patty always does a great job on the Funerals of the Famous. And this was an interesting year for it because, she got to write some really good Funerals of the Famous story, including, Willie Mays was, a personal favorite of mine. Do you recall that one? Did you get a kick out of it?
I do. And that was an interesting one because Willie Mays died. We just happened to be running a piece in AFD about Babe Ruth. And it was like, gee, Willie Mays just died and we're talking about Babe Ruth. So I think I fashioned a little intro to say, hey, Willie Mays died, but we had this on tap. And then Patty went ahead and wrote one about Willie Mays. Now, he didn't have a big funeral like anything along the lines of Babe Ruth had, but they did have a big event in San Francisco at the stadium. And I think you're right. She did a great job just capturing. I know you or a sibling of yours or a family member was a giant Willie Mays fan. Is that right too? So that you had to be appreciative of that.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was a huge Willie Mays fan, and we were kind of indoctrinated into the Church of Willie Mays at a really young age.
Yes. Now I'm going to ask you a question that you, I know, would ask me and have asked me and everybody that talks to you. Is there something that you would like to talk about in terms of what's coming up, what you just saw in 2024 and what's coming up in 2025 that intrigues you or that you'd just like to give a shout out about?
Honestly, I do have one quick thing. I've been getting voicemails. Actually, I haven't been getting voicemails. I've been soliciting voicemails, but I've had people respond to my solicitations, and I want to do more of that this year. I'd like to have people calling me to ask, to answer questions or to ask questions or to make comments. And I'd like to put them into the podcast every week, maybe put them in the Wednesday bonus episode, or maybe if someone comments on the news and on Friday, I can put it in case you missed it in the following Friday. So if you are a listener and you want to interact, I would love it to have you reach out. So you can call me at 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. I'll put this in the show notes because I'll be the one who edits this episode. And if you call and leave a message and it's appropriate, I'll put it in the show. I mean, if you're mean to me, I'll still put it in the show. If you mean to someone else, I probably won't. But see, leave me a message and let's see what kind of things we can do with that, because I really enjoy doing the podcast and I like getting, notifications from you guys that, you saw it and you liked it, or you saw it and you didn't like it, or anything. And to have this voice feedback option in 2025, I think it'll do well for everybody. I think everybody will get a kick out of it.
Well, I think we can agree there's no way forward without new ideas coming all the time.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing them and we're trying to report on them in all our publications. So it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Oh, it's absolutely a blast. I want to do more of these too this year, so we'll see about that. But I will catch you guys next week. Yeah. Looking for a way to honor your loved one while honoring the planet? At Passages, we specialize in eco-friendly funeral products made from renewable, biodegradable materials. Whether it's a stunning willow casket, a biodegradable urn for scattering, or our unique memorial keepsakes, we help create meaningful goodbyes that tread lightly on the earth. Join the movement toward greener funerals. Visit passagesinternational.com and discover how you can celebrate a life while protecting the planet for generations to come. Link in the show notes. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written by Tom Nondorf and edited by me, Tony Russo. If you are listening on your computer and would like to listen on your phone, it is easy to do. Just open the podcatcher of your choice. If you have an iPhone, there's a purple circle that is for Apple Podcasts. Just tap on that and type Funeral Service Insider. We're the only one with that name, so it will come up. Otherwise, if you have an Android device, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon Music. Any place that you get podcasts, you can get us. And if it's, for example, Spotify, same thing. Just open up Spotify, type Funeral Service Insider. Spotify has podcasts. We're the only one with that name. So you will be able to subscribe to us there. And of course, subscribe is free. Some people get confused because sometimes subscriptions are paid, not in the case of this podcast. So we would love to hear from you more. We would love for you to hear from us more. And the best way to do that is to subscribe. We hope you have a fantastic new year. And we are looking forward to a great 2025 for Funeral Service. And I will catch you next time on Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.